She overheard an amazing secret on a billionaire's shoulder that revealed her incredible future. Samantha's heart raced as she quietly approached Richard Caldwell's table, his indigo suit sharp against the restaurant's dim lighting. This wasn't just any table. It was where hope collided with despair. As she refilled his water glass, she caught snippets of conversation, phrases like eco-initiative, funding, and change the landscape. Her breath caught in her throat. It struck her. This could be her chance. The chance to break free from the weight of her family's expectations, from the shadows of self-doubt. But the thought also sent shivers down her spine. She was mere minutes from a revelation that could either make her or break her. In the midst of serving chic appetizers and decadent entrees, Samantha wrestled with her daunting reality. Her family had never carved a path for ambition. They were trapped in a cycle of modesty and struggle. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Soaring ambitions are just that, dreams. Yet here, standing before one of the most powerful men in America, she felt restless embers of determination ignite within her. If Richard's venture took off, it wouldn't just help the planet. It would send shockwaves through the very chains that held her family down. But could she convince him she was worth his time? When Richard laughed, melodic and layered as he conversed with a friend, Samantha felt the juxtaposition of their worlds like a heavy blanket. Running her fingers along the edge of the table, anxiety twisted in her stomach. It wasn't just her trepidation, it was the bitter taste of inadequacy. How could she, a waitress with no connections, pitch her ideas to a man whose universe was light years away from hers? Her heart sank as she glimpsed a fellow student drive past in a shiny Tesla, a reminder of her own limitations, rich, preppy, and perfectly polished. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But the stakes were rising even higher. A rumor spiraled. A scandal involving Richard and his company was on the brink of breaking. Disgraced billionaires didn't reignite their fortunes on kindness. The thought of him failing, of her dreams collapsing, sent a chill of dread creeping down her spine. Richard always seemed like the kind of man who would either tackle or ignore his responsibilities. What did it matter if he took the fall? Torn between loyalty to her family and her desperate urge to break free, Samantha's mind raced. If he self-destructed, her opportunity might vanish. Still, if he succeeded, he could elevate her voice. The walls seemed to close in around her as she wrestled with nightmarish scenarios. Did she attempt to pull Richard from the flames, or did she snatch the chance to elevate herself from the ashes of despair? Staring into Richard's piercing gaze, Samantha felt the weight of 1,000 expectations. The air was thick with pressure as she contemplated confronting him, not just for herself but for every overlooked dream. With the future hanging precariously on her next words, she knew that the choice she made could not only alter her own destiny, but reshape the very fabric of her family's future. What would she decide to do? And might that choice echo beyond their lives into something much bigger, an opportunity for change or a surrender to tradition? With her heart pounding in her chest, Samantha stepped closer to Richard, rehearsing the words she barely dared to formulate. She could feel the cool surface of the table against her palm, grounding her in the moment. And yet the weight of uncertainty loomed heavily. If she failed now, if she turned back, it would feel like capitulation. What if this was her only shot at freedom? "Excuse me, Mr. Caldwell?" Her voice emerged, a hesitant whisper as it sliced through the laughter and clinking glasses. The room began to blur, the din fading as Richard's gaze snapped to her, sharp and questioning, drawing her in like a moth to flame. "Yes," he replied, raising an eyebrow with genuine curiosity. For a fleeting moment, Samantha glimpsed a hint of warmth in his demeanor, an openness that encouraged her to lean into the possibility. Gathering her resolve, she forged ahead. I heard you mention an eco-initiative earlier. I have some ideas that could contribute. Her voice steadied as she found the right cadence. They might help your project expand and reach more people. Richard's expression transformed, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. You're a waitress, right? How do you know about eco-initiatives? The skepticism in his tone pierced her, but rather than retreat, adrenaline surged through her. Because I care, she countered, her voice gaining strength. I'm tired of watching my family struggle. I want to do something meaningful, something that changes lives. The response was immediate. Richard studied her, and in that silent exchange she felt an awakening within herself. Perhaps he sensed her desperation, but also perhaps he recognized the potential on the precipice of her words. You have passion, he replied thoughtfully, but passion alone doesn't fuel projects. She was ready for this. I know how to identify opportunities, she insisted, to connect problems with solutions. I may serve food right now, but I can analyze more than just a menu. It's about identifying the heart of the issue. His eyes narrowed slightly as the challenge set in. Can you provide me with a specific idea? Something more than talk? Her mind raced against the clock, crystallizing thoughts and sifting through moments of inspiration that had floated through her while cleaning tables. What if you included a community-based approach in your initiative? Engage locals, empower them to participate in the solutions, not just preach to them, but create allies who share the vision. That could amplify funding and participation. She held her breath, a mountain of hope solidifying behind her chest as she considered the consequences of taking this leap. Richard regarded her in silence, the inner workings of his mind a puzzle buried beneath an inscrutable mask. Time stretched in a taut silence that felt charged with possibility, but the moment lingered, and fear recoiled within her. Was she pushing too far? Richard's expression remained inscrutable. Doubt began to gnaw at her confidence like a persistent shadow. What if she had misread the moment entirely? Before she could retreat into self-doubt, Richard broke the silence with a half-smile. Interesting concept. Tell me more about this community-based approach. Relief and exhilaration flooded through her, awakening a tenacity she hadn't known existed. She began to articulate her ideas with newfound authority, exploring the intersection of personal and communal engagement. As her ideas flowed, every word nourished the ember of her dreams, igniting a fire that had long been smothered by uncertainty. Yet, just as momentum shifted in her favor, a sudden commotion at the entrance of the restaurant broke her focus. A group of reporters crashed through the doors, their camera lenses gleaming like predatory eyes. The scandal was here, chasing Richard, and with it, the potent fear that everything she had begun to build might come crashing down. As cameras turned toward him, she saw the look of alarm flicker across Richard's face, the carefree billionaire suddenly stripped of his bravado. Samantha's heart sank, pulsating with doubt. Would he abandon her, severing any spark of hope she'd just ignited? The moment hung precariously, threatening to unravel everything. She felt the icy grip of fate tighten around her neck. The room seemed smaller as she registered his conflict. Would he choose the whispers of the past or embrace the promise of emerging possibility? Richard, she began, but the weight of his world eclipsed her voice. The next choice loomed large before them. Which path would he choose? Would Samantha become another fleeting moment in his life? Or was she on the verge of convincing him to embrace something new? Samantha's pulse quickened as the chaos heightened, churning the air around her into an overwhelming haze. The reporters stormed in, their shouts clashing with the laughter of earlier. It was all too loud, too chaotic. Richard's face soured, his eyes darting nervously between the group encroaching upon him and the cluster of astonished patrons who had also turned to gawk. Stay calm, Richard muttered under his breath, but Samantha caught the edge of panic in his voice. She needed to act. She couldn't let this opportunity slip away. Mr. Caldwell, a reporter yelled, directing the barrage of questions at him, their intent clear. What's the status of the eco-initiative? Is there a connection between it and the ongoing allegations against you? Richard stood, shoulders tense, preparing for the storm. But Samantha felt a surge within her, a flicker of courage, a conviction that her voice might tip the balance. Stepping slightly forward, she called out, "Let him speak." The reporters turned toward her, surprised by the interruption from the waitress. For a moment there was silence, the kind that hangs thick in the air before an inevitable clash. She felt eyes piercing through her, measuring her worth. Then Richard looked at her, a flash of surprise and perhaps something deeper unwinding in his expressive gaze. She could see his tension, yet he didn't dismiss her. Instead, he seemed to appreciate the solidarity in her defiance. "Listen, I have things to say," he finally declared, taking a step toward the reporters, his composure gradually returning. "My plans are about real change, positive impact. They deserve a discussion on their own merit rather than being drowned out by baseless rumors." Gathering herself, Samantha took a stride closer to Richard. "Yes, and it's not just his initiative, I have ideas too." The murmurs of the crowd intensified. Richard cast a sidelong glance her way, but she caught something in his expression. Encouragement entwined with disbelief. Richard was allowing her to share the narrative, a collaboration forming in the face of adversity. "What do you have to say?" Richard prodded her gently, his voice low but firm. She could hear a hint of challenge wrapped in his invitation, nudging her to dig deeper, to rise to the occasion. "I work with the community every day," she began, her voice growing in confidence, finding clarity amidst the clamor. "People want to be part of change. There's a wealth of talent and passion in our neighborhoods that can support a real eco-initiative if you give them the right platform to express themselves." Richard smiled. It was a hint of genuine admiration, and the tension melted for a heartbeat. Suddenly the reporters swarmed closer, seemingly enthralled by the unexpected teamwork. "Is the waitress suggesting collaboration?" one asked, skeptical but intrigued. "Yes," Richard replied, standing confidently beside her. "Samantha here is proposing a genuine approach, one that involves empowerment instead of mere charity." As she spoke, Samantha felt an electrifying confidence weaving through her. This wasn't just about the initiative. It wasn't just about Richard and the glare of the cameras. It was about her identity, her vision, the evolution of who she was becoming. With every word that passed her lips, she felt the shackles of her old life loosening. Each idea served a piece of her past that no longer defined her. The intensity shifted. The reporters, initially ready to pounce on scandal and gossip, were now intrigued by a fresh narrative. Action, innovation, collaboration. In this moment, she was no longer just a waitress. She was a catalyst. But as the questions evolved, so too did the stakes. What would happen if Richard followed through on her suggestion? How would his world, one of elite leisure, intertwine with her grassroots vision? It was exhilarating and terrifying. Then, unexpectedly, a voice broke through the noise. "Richard, who is this?" The question came from the back of the throng, pointed and accusatory, a reminder of the looming controversy. Samantha's resolve faltered for an instant. She glanced at Richard, gauging his reaction as eyes bore down on her. Would he protect her newfound role in this whirlwind, or would the pressures pull him back into the shadows from which he had emerged? The realization struck hard. This was not just a conversation. This was a defining moment. As she breathed in deeply, the weight of improbable opportunity coiled around her chest, pushing her forward. "I'm someone who believes we can do better." Would that be enough to sway perceptions? Could her belief catalyze not just a conversation, but a true transformation? And in that moment, something shifted within her. This was the advent of her potential, a threshold looming just ahead. Richard glanced down at her, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Whatever would come of this, maybe, just maybe, they were both on the precipice of something far greater than either had anticipated. But then, another question pierced the air, louder and sharper than before, hinting at darker secrets that could unravel their purpose. What will happen next in the wake of this initiative? The tension escalated, shadows of doubt creeping back in with every explosive question, and the direction of their fates hung perilously in the balance. The spotlight was upon them now. Were they ready to embrace the whirlwind, or would they be swept away by it? Samantha's heart raced as the question lingered in the air. thick with expectancy. Whispers swirled around her, igniting a firestorm of uncertainty, though she found herself standing taller next to Richard. The climate seemed charged with possibility, yet shadows of doubt flickered at the edges of her mind. Was this the moment she had been waiting for, or the beginning of a downfall? Richard turned toward her, his brow furrowed, the weight of the question pressing heavily on both of them. "We're just getting started," he asserted, but his voice carried an undercurrent of both conviction and vulnerability. She sensed the stakes were higher than the faint, optimistic cadence of his words suggested. Her mind raced to the faces she'd seen in the community, each one a reminder of the change she desired. Could Richard really embrace the proactive vision they had crafted together? Or would the external pressures drown out the authenticity of their collective ambition? A vicious pang of self-doubt slipped in. Was she truly ready for this? Could she stand up to the scrutiny, the public eye? Part of moving forward means being transparent. She addressed the cluster of reporters, drawing on the flicker of confidence that had ignited during the conversation. Richard is right. It's not just about his initiative. It involves everyone. She glanced subtly at Richard, gauging his response while forging her own path. We can't hide from the challenges we face. If we are to create real change, we need to address the issues, to involve those who are directly affected. The murmurs grew as the crowd processed her words, the initial shock gradually turning into intrigue. "And what do you propose?" one reporter challenged, eyes narrowing as if hoping to catch her off guard. "I propose we listen, truly listen, to the voices of those in our communities," she replied, her breath steadying. "They have ideas that can inform and evolve this initiative into something tangible, not just a distant plan." Richard interjected, "We're looking at a new model that benefits not just a select few but drives opportunity and sustainability for everyone involved." There was an earnestness in his tone, and Samantha felt the connection between them solidify, a bond forged in the flames of ambition. As the questions continued to circle like vultures, each probing for weakness, Samantha caught sight of a familiar face among the reporters. It was one of her former colleagues, Jake, a skeptical but intelligent man. Would he believe in her vision? The tension pivoted within her. Would he play a role in shaping her narrative? She refocused, realizing that her potential lay not just in Richard's shadow, but in standing strong in her own light. What if she could rewrite the narrative, shifting perceptions not just about them but about herself? Could this collaboration lead to more concrete actions? Jake asked, tilting his head, intrigued. What would that look like? That's the conversation we need to have. A real dialogue, not just a press statement, she replied, her pulse thrumming. It's not just about addressing the allegations currently surrounding you, Richard. It's a chance to redefine the narrative we want to create. Richard nodded, clearly leaning into her logic while still holding an air of authority amidst the tumult. But then that haunting voice faltered from the back again, challenging their budding rapport. What do you know about it? You're just a waitress. Samantha felt her stomach twist, that old label rearing its ugly head. It was a challenge meant to undermine her, but this time it sparked clarity rather than fear. There's power in every kind of work. She shot back, her words firm. The contributions from everyday people are often overlooked, but they're essential to the fabric of change. I'm not just a waitress. I'm part of a movement that believes in actionable ideas. I can translate passion into plans. The reporters shifted, some raising their eyebrows, others scribbling furiously. She could see the murmurs ripple through the crowd, a shift happening. But as energy buzzed around her, the silhouette of uncertainty slid back in. What if they were too caught in the controversy? What if her attempts were drowned out by the ramifications of Richard's past? In that moment, Samantha knew she had a choice. Continue forging ahead despite the scrutiny she faced, or step back into the shadows where she once belonged. The noisy chaos suddenly felt like a cacophony of possibilities, each question ringing with potential. Samantha locked eyes with Richard as he breathed a word of reassurance and belief. Yet beneath the surface, she sensed the urgent need for resolution, the pressing desire to transform their passion into action. But could they bridge the gap between vulnerability and opportunity before it was too late? Then the final question cut through, sharp and blunt. What secrets are you holding that could either make or break this initiative? The crowd held its breath, and an unsettling tension gripped Samantha's heart. What had they stumbled into? Would the truth about their journey emerge, or might it tear them apart before they even began? Samantha's heart raced even more as the question echoed through the thrumming silence that had fallen over the gathered crowd. Richard's eyes darted to her, a fleeting moment of tension flitting across his features. Secrets? It was like the word hung in the air, weighted with implication. Doubt gripped her again, as harsh and constricting as the blazer she wore. She felt exposed, as if the truth of her own insecurities might leap into the open for all to see. But at that moment, a flicker of resolve surged within her. The memory of every dismissive glance she had ever received, the whispered doubts about her worth and that old label. Just a waitress. She refused to let it define her any longer. Let's clarify. She spoke over the uneasy murmurs. The secrets aren't just about hiding information. It's about revealing deeper truths that can drive real change and transparency. Her voice rose slightly, filled with determination that surprised even herself. I believe we can and should cultivate an environment where honesty is valued. Richard, seemingly emboldened by her conviction, added, Every initiative has its obstacles, and yes, there are challenges we must face head-on. Change doesn't happen without courage. There was a surprising ease in their cooperation. Each supported the other's resolve like two seedlings rooting into the same growing space. Yet, Jake's voice cut through their camaraderie again. And what about your past, Samantha? Do you have skeletons that could jeopardize this mission? His eyes locked onto hers, seeking embedded contradictions in her words. Which to trust? The mask of confidence she wore, or the vulnerability lurking beneath? She was caught within that gaze, feeling her heart thrumming louder than before. The past she had tried to escape crashed back, dredging up fears and second-guessing. But this time she pushed against that tide. Yes, I have a past. We all do, she said, her voice steadying. It shaped me, but it doesn't define my future. What matters now is what we choose to do with our actions moving forward. The crowd's energy shifted again, but she sensed it, almost like electricity in the air, an anticipation that was almost palpable. There was a collective yearning to understand who she was becoming, a desire to reflect her growth. But subtly the realization whispered through her thoughts. She was more than just a reflection of Richard's aspirations or the judgments of others. She was charting her own course, a path forged in authenticity and ambition, connected to the voices she had determined would be heard. Transparency hinges on vulnerability, she declared, as if speaking affirmations into existence. It's about sharing our challenges, our flaws, and using them to foster resilience. This isn't just Richard's initiative, it's ours, infused with authenticity. She felt emboldened by her own words, the echoes of the gathered crowd reinforcing her emerging sense of power. As the murmurs around her grew louder, so did the realization that she was no longer merely the sidekick. A new question arose from the depths of her thoughts. How would she wage this new method of engagement? Before she could fully formulate the answer, the scrims of reporters adjusted their stance. The questions flowed in neater, tidier nests, each a delicate dance around their unfolding narrative, tantalizing in their implication. Somewhere deep down, an ember of excitement flared. Could she orchestrate a shift not just in perception but in tangible action? She thought about the countless discussions she could initiate, the ideals she could challenge, and the connections she could nurture. But before she could sketch out the framework of their next move, Richard's phone buzzed in his pocket and drew his attention. He glanced at it and frowned, a visible shadow creeping over his expression. I have to take this, he murmured, stepping back from the crowd. His absence left a sudden gaping void beside her, and insecurities flooded back. What if it was news that unraveled everything they had built in just a moment? Samantha felt the looming uncertainty once again, that prickling fear that clung more heavily than before. In that pivotal silence she realized the stakes had shifted. Now, not only did she have to guard Richard's public image, but cultivate her own burgeoning role in shaping the future. Would she be ready for whatever lay ahead when Richard returned? The unraveling potential of their situation felt dizzying, an exhilarating tightrope walk between possibility and peril. Then the whispers escalated again, and a booming voice from the back shouted a new inquiry. What if this all goes wrong? What's your plan then? Even as apprehension tightened inside her chest, Samantha felt a steely resolve harden in her core. She was no longer just a participant in the unfolding drama. She was a crucial player. It was time to claim her narrative. The scene around her teetered on the edge, a balance between expectation and chaos. Samantha inhaled deeply and prepared to respond. What came next could shape everything. Would she rise to meet the challenge, or would uncertainty pull her back into the shadows? The crowd's anticipation pulsed like a living thing before her, their collective gaze pinning Samantha under a spotlight she could no longer avoid. She felt the weight of expectation mingling with her unease, a heady cocktail of resolve and trepidation. The booming voice that had challenged her echoed in her mind. What if this all goes wrong? For a brief moment she let the fear course through her. What would her response be if everything collapsed before the journey even began? Panic whispered insidiously that she might reveal more than she intended, yet the fire of ambition burned brightly within her. This was her moment to assert herself, to redefine her role not just beside Richard, but on her own. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. We are all vulnerable. We face uncertainty every single day. But that doesn't mean we hide or shy away from collaboration. It means we face the challenges together, learn, and adapt. Her voice rang out with a clarity fueled by passion, reverberating through the murmurs of the audience. They leaned in, holding tightly to her words. She could sense Richard's absence, not only as a loss of camaraderie but also as a stark reminder of the void she needed to fill. With each passing second, her doubt had to evolve into determination. Providing the answers was now her responsibility. In the depths of her psyche, she acknowledged a pivotal truth. To be authentic meant to embrace the discomfort that inevitably came with transformation. Samantha continued, I may not have all the answers, but I stand here ready to engage with all of you, to explore what this journey means for each one of us. Let's not merely focus on the potential pitfalls. Let's talk about the possibilities. Every setback can be a setup for something greater. The crowd responded with a shift in energy. Interest peaked in their expressions, and a whisper of recognition passed among them. They were hungry for change, for dialogue that mattered. It lit a fire beneath her. Perhaps she could rally them around an ideal that transcended personal ambition. This was about more than just her or Richard's narratives. In the moment of clarity, she felt an unexpected surge of creativity. Ideas moved like rapid currents in her mind. Workshops, community meetings, brainstorming sessions, real engagements that broke down barriers and established connections. It would require focus and effort, but the visibility of her voice hinged on the strength of her intentions. This was where she could solidify her stance. As she elaborated, she felt the gentle pulling of the collective consciousness wrapping around her. Each suggestion was a thread spun from the unspoken hopes of the group, stitching a new fabric of collaboration and solidarity. She didn't just want to be seen. She wanted to be understood. Suddenly, a scuffle broke through her thoughts as Richard emerged from the side, his face barely masking concern. The atmosphere shifted yet again. Whispers of speculation prickled the air. His eyes met hers, and in them was a plea for reassurance that she alone had to fulfill. She couldn't afford to falter now, but even as she held the crowd, a gnawing question resurfaced, persistent and unsettling. What had he learned during that phone call? Were there revelations that might unravel everything she had built in that few intense moments? Uncertainty gripped her, reminding her of the fragility inherent in this journey. Richard took center stage again, his brow furrowed. Samantha, He hesitated, the weight of something unsaid hanging heavily. She studied him, realizing this was a critical juncture, between their journeys, between collaboration and skepticism. He had stepped away, but she had adapted. Now, standing together, she felt the call to forge ahead. Instinct kicked in, pushing her forward. "We need to talk about what comes next," she declared, defiant and unwavering. "We've begun to carve a path. What we do from here must be aligned, and we need to be honest, open about the trials ahead." The crowd's attention heightened, grasping at the tension unraveling between her and Richard. Would he embrace the forward momentum, or would he hesitate, allowing doubt to creep back in? Richard's eyes darted between the erupting energy of the audience and the ethos she had begun to weave. Would he trust her vision enough to step boldly into the unknown? The confrontation was palpable, a fracture of silence interleaved with her pulse. Could she now inspire not only herself, but him as well? The moment tipped, and she was no longer merely riding the waves of opportunity. She was thrusting a hand into the depths of her potential. A culmination had arrived, and the room held its breath. Richard's next words would determine everything, a balance teetering on the edge of revelation. Would their tenuous alliance evolve or shatter beneath the weight of hidden anxieties? Richard inhaled sharply, words caught under the tension that suffocated the air. "Samantha," he finally uttered, "what I learned was that we have a choice. We can either stick to the old ways or take a risk that might redefine everything." The crowd remained silent, and Samantha felt a sudden mingling of anticipation and trepidation at his revelation. The path forward was precarious, and she was keenly aware that they were standing on a precipice, between tradition and innovation, security and possibility. "Taking risks can be daunting, Richard," she said, her voice steady but layered with the anxiety that croaked beneath. "But it's not just about making changes. It's about ensuring that those changes are rooted in purpose. People want to feel secure, not revolutionized for the sake of it." He nodded slowly, digesting her words, yet there was a flicker of indecision in his eyes that made the crowd's silence even louder. Could they harness that energy to propel forward, or would it dissipate beneath the lingering fear of failure? "What if we fail?" he asked, vulnerability suddenly breaking through his composed exterior. "What if the risks we're contemplating backfire?" Samantha met his gaze, her heart pounding. She felt the weight of every quiet yet potent challenge. She didn't have the answers, but she had conviction. "Failure is part of progress. If we're going to grow, Richard, we have to accept that. We learn, we adapt, and we forge ahead even stronger." Richard hesitated, the silence pressing in again. Yet she could see the gears grinding in his mind, and for an instant, hope flickered in her chest. The moment of truth lay within his grasp, and it was growing increasingly clear that he needed to make this leap with her. "Imagine," she continued, "if we embrace this uncertainty together, we unlock potential we didn't even know existed. Perhaps it's time to stop asking what if, and start asking why not." His brow furrowed deeper, but the tension between them began to shift. She could sense him weighing the implications, asking himself if he had ever envisioned a future where they could not only work together, but innovate with authenticity. Samantha's voice rose above the surging anticipation gripping the audience. "People are ready for change, they're hungry for it. We don't stand at the precipice of disaster. We stand on the verge of discovery, if we're willing to embrace each other's strengths and yes, even our vulnerabilities." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, and she felt the charge in the room as energy morphed into excitement. Slowly, she saw Richard's expression soften, and it encouraged her. "There's something here," she said, a plea carried in her words. "A foundation we can build together. We've stepped into the fray, both scared and courageous, so let's own that fear and turn it into strategy. I need you to meet me halfway." Finally, an uncertain nod emerged from Richard. Flashes of uncertainty lingered in his eyes, but he was no longer a hollow figure of skepticism. The door to collaboration had cracked open. As anticipation turned to intrigue, Samantha's pulse accelerated, a call to arms echoing inside her. Did Richard now recognize the potential of their partnership, or would he retreat back into his comfort zone? And as his lips parted, a new tension unfurled in the air. The question of whether Richard's choice would align with her radical vision for the future loomed larger than any hesitation they had previously felt. "I'm in," he said finally, his voice steady, though the shadow of hesitation still danced in his demeanor. Samantha's heart raced. Could this be the moment that defined not only her path but their partnership? She realized the urgency to seize this juncture brimming with possibilities. Yet as a wave of relief washed over her, an unsettling thought flickered in the recesses of her mind. They were stepping towards uncharted territory, facing the possibility of failure head-on, but also an opportunity to break free of the constraints that weighed them down. What lay ahead could either fulfill their bold aspirations or plunge them into deeper challenges. For in every venture toward transformation, the specter of uncertainty would always linger just out of sight, waiting to confront them. And the consequences of their choices might not be as simple as they hoped. As the crowd began to stir with newfound anticipation, Samantha turned back to Richard, resolute yet uncertain, the next milestone on their journey looming in the shadows. Would their newfound alliance withstand the pressures they were about to face, or would they find themselves confronted by adversities that tested their resolve more than they had ever imagined? Samantha could feel the weight of her decision pushing down on her, mingling with the excitement igniting around her. Richard's tentative agreement hung in the air, sweet yet heavy with unsaid implications. What began as a hesitant partnership had now shifted into something brewing with promise. Yet the road ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty. As the crowd's murmurs began to swell into a buzz, she took a moment to reflect on Richard's words. What if we fail? It echoed in her mind, each repetition a reminder of the stakes involved. The gathering was not just about her vision. It was a summoning for everyone present, an exploration into the depths of risk and reward. Think about it, Richard, she urged, her eyes locked on his. This isn't merely about transformation for its sake. It's about forging a path that matters. If we allow the fear of failure to dictate our actions, we risk stagnation. We cannot let anxiety shackle us. She could see the myriad thoughts cascading through him, a flash of recognition as he contemplated the very essence of choice. In that moment, they didn't just represent a partnership, they symbolized a fusion of fortitude and innovation. Let's create a framework, he said cautiously, a decision beginning to solidify in his mind. We can start by laying out what this transformation looks like. Exactly, she exclaimed, sensing momentum shifting in their direction. If we're going to innovate, we need structure, some guiding principles that protect the essence of what we aim to reform while allowing for flexibility in execution. Ideas began to bubble between them, infused with urgency. Together, they scribbled concepts on a paper, trading thoughts with a newfound fervor. They spoke of transparency, adaptation, and most importantly, shared ownership. Each point became a stepping stone into their envisioned future, crafting a blueprint that resonated with purpose. Yet as Samantha immersed herself in this collaborative endeavor, she could not push away the thought that lingered ominously. What would it mean if their risks failed? Each commitment made was a plunge into the unknown, opening them up to vulnerability, something that made her skin prickle with unease. After hours of brainstorming, Richard rubbed the back of his neck, a sign of fatigue wrestling with exhilaration. We should present this to the rest of the team, he suggested hesitantly. The thrill of anticipation coursed through her veins. Yes, but we need to frame our presentation in a way that encourages optimism and invites questions. Our team has to feel safe in this space of innovative risk-taking. As they prepared to engage with their colleagues, the stakes felt heavier, layers of expectation unfurling like a massive tapestry woven from tensions and hopes. Would their peers embrace this radical pivot, or would they constrict their progress with doubt? Richard turned to her. What if they push back? What if they're not ready? His voice faltered under the weight of uncertainty. Samantha held his gaze steady, etching her resolve into her expression. Then we confront that fear together. This is our vision. We cannot shy away from opposition. If we're going to make a mark, we need to be prepared for challenge. As they finalized their notes, she felt the ground beneath them begin to shift. The inner strength she had cultivated stirred, revealing sparks of courage she hadn't acknowledged before. Perhaps this was what she had always sought. An opportunity not just to lead but to inspire resilience in the very faces of doubt. They stood at the threshold of possibility, but the question loomed larger than ever. Would their collaborative spark ignite their team, or would it fizzle under the weight of skepticism? As Richard took a deep breath, preparing to face their colleagues, Samantha realized that she needed to own everything she had laid bare. This was her chance to not only advocate change, but to nurture an environment where embracing failure was the first step toward success. Just then, a whisper traversed the back of her mind, reminding her of a bitter truth. This path, fraught with emotional and professional peril, required more than bravery. Each decision could redefine their future in ways they hadn't yet anticipated. The ultimate question simmered beneath the surface. Could they stand firm on the edge of chaos, or would the specter of failure rear its head in a way they could never have predicted? Samantha watched Richard's shoulders tense as he lingered in front of their colleagues, the paper filled with their carefully crafted ideas trembling slightly in his hands. She felt the time stretching, each second a deliberate torment as anticipation coiled within her. Would he find his voice, or would the weight of doubt crush their shared dreams? As Richard finally began to speak, she noted the nervous glance he cast across the room. It served as a mirror reflecting her own apprehension, a gut-clenching reminder of the stakes they were gambling. She believed in their vision, yet the unknown loomed threateningly, whispering doubts in the recesses of her mind. What if all this effort spiraled into a monumental misstep? While Richard elaborated on their framework for change, Samantha focused on her breathing, willing herself to center her thoughts. Beneath the simmering anxiety was a deep well of determination, urging her to channel it into clarity. As he spoke of shared ownership and adaptability, core principles they had so fervently discussed, she felt the urge to jump in, to supplement his passion with her own fervor. "Let me clarify something," she interjected, her voice steady despite the storm raging within. "This isn't merely a project. It's a journey that we'll embark on together. If we embrace our vulnerabilities and treat missteps as lessons, we pave a brighter path ahead." The eyes of her colleagues widened. She saw their curiosity morph into something resembling intrigue. It planted a seed of hope. Perhaps this ambiguity surrounding failure could be transformed into potential. As each teammate shared their thoughts, Samantha paid attention to the spectrum of responses, capturing the concerns, objections, and suggestions flowing like a current. Her mind whirled, feverishly processing the feedback, weighing it against the vision they had crafted. But with every supportive nod and resounding applause, a darker realization gnawed at her. The atmosphere had shifted, teetering precariously between hopeful engagement and skepticism. After the presentation concluded, Richard was visibly relieved even as murmured conversations began filling the air. Samantha excused herself momentarily, stepping aside to gather her thoughts. Alone in a small corner of the office, she cajoled herself to reject any remnants of self-doubt. Instead, she fostered a resolve that surged through her, the kind unavailable in quiet retreats, but found in the fray of confrontation. It was then she overheard snippets of conversation as a few teammates debriefed nearby. "What if they're in over their heads?" one questioned. Another ventured, "It almost feels like unnecessary risk." The specter of skepticism, once a distant thought, now hovered right above her, piercing her resolve with unexpected clarity. Samantha's heart raced. She returned to Richard, determination etched into her features. "We need to invite more dialogue," she said, urgency lacing her words. "Let's host sessions where everyone can air their doubts and questions instead of keeping them bottled up. If we're vulnerable, we encourage a culture of fearlessness." Richard met her gaze, his expression shifting from worry to admiration. "Are you sure? Opening the floor like that could expose weaknesses." "Exactly. It'll show them we're human, imperfect but willing to evolve," she insisted, emboldened by the realization that their journey wasn't merely to lead innovation, but foster resilience. As they devised plans for subsequent brainstorming sessions, Samantha felt a rush of energy, the weight on her shoulders replaced by purpose. Yet, as she looked towards the horizon of possibilities, a darker undertone pulsed beneath their resolve. Each confrontation required her to dig deeper within. to confront not just external pushback but her own inner critic, that small voice urging her to retreat. That evening, as uncertainty still flickered around them, a thought crossed Samantha's mind. Perhaps it wasn't just about embracing failure, but also about embracing herself, every imperfect angle that had led her to here. What would it take for her to face her greatest fear head-on, the gnawing suffocation of inadequacy? With that question echoing, the path to uncharted territory called to her, a voice both thrilling and terrifying. The time had come to confront not just their external challenges, but the unrelenting shadows lurking within. The stage was set for a deeper, more personal journey, one that would challenge the very fabric of her identity. Samantha stood in front of the crowd that had gathered, no longer just a waitress serving food but a woman embracing a newfound identity crafted through adversity. The atmosphere shimmered with an unpredictable energy, and she could feel the stirrings of potential around her. Richard had reached for the unexpected after the unease surrounding their proposal, but it was Samantha who now stood at the forefront, ready to lead. Together, we will reshape not just our initiative but the way we approach challenges, she declared, her voice strong and certain. It's time we embraced the complexity of our vision, acknowledging that growth comes from vulnerability and constructive dialogue. As her words rolled from her tongue, the mechanics of fear and hesitation unclenched around her heart. This was the embodiment of her journey, the moment where she could define her role beyond the shadows that had once confined her. Those hesitations she had felt just days ago, that dissonance between self-doubt and ambition, began to dissolve as she honed in on a purpose greater than herself. She observed Richard from the corner of her eye as she spoke, and saw the admiration in his gaze, adding fuel to the fire of her determination. There was something transformative in being acknowledged, not merely for her role, but for her unique insights. She was no longer scared of being just a waitress. She was part of a movement that mattered. As feedback poured in, Samantha embraced each challenge, listening to her teammates' apprehensions with newfound confidence. This was no longer a solitary effort. They were in it together. Every question carved out an opportunity for growth. Let's talk about how our Eagle's vision can touch every corner of our community, she suggested after a colleague raised concerns about the initiative's scope. Throughout the next few weeks, they created forums where individuals could voice their fears openly, coalescing the team and forging an ethos grounded in trust. As barriers fell, Samantha recognized a tangible shift, not just within her organization, but within herself. For every question raised by skeptics, answers formed, threading their way through real, productive discussions. The shadows of doubt that had clung to her began to dissipate, revealing a woman firmly rooted in self-worth. Their collaboration blossomed into a strategic workshop that gave birth to tangible projects designed to engage and empower community involvement in the eco-initiative. The team's excitement surged, reflected in their enthusiasm. They were discussing specifics, how they could include the community's input in ways that shaped their work and defined their goals, a momentum that Samantha felt acutely. Days turned into weeks, and as the initiative prepared for launch, the culmination of effort was palpable. Richard extended his hand, inviting her to join him on stage for a press conference that would introduce the project to the wider public. You've led this vision, Samantha. It's time for your voice to be heard. Standing side by side, they spoke as equal partners. Samantha communicated the heart of the initiative, emphasizing that every voice, especially those from the community, mattered. When applause erupted, she felt an indescribable pride swell within her. This was more than recognition. It was validation of her transformation. As they concluded the conference, Richard turned to her, an expression of genuine gratitude in his eyes. I couldn't have done this without you, Samantha. A silence fell as both writers of their narrative shared in a mutual appreciation. The new initiative thrived, signing on partners, garnering attention, and embracing the very essence of shared responsibility. Public recognition flowed from unexpected corners. Even local media praised their authentic approach to addressing the community's needs. What once felt unattainable had not only manifested but flourished. In the ensuing months, Samantha wrote her own narrative anew. She transitioned from waitress to project head, and then on to community advocate. The evolution felt like a continuous release of chains that had bound her. Each step signified not just a personal triumph, but a collective awakening of potential around her. The turning tide not only reshaped Richard's public image but also breathed new life into Samantha's sense of identity. Her parents noticed the changes. They couldn't ignore the spark of confidence radiating from her. Their conversations shifted from limiting aspirations to a shared hope for their family's brighter future, ignited by the very actions of one bold choice. As she reflected on her journey, she felt a profound sense of closure envelop her. Samantha had conquered her fears and insecurities, building a new legacy for herself and her family, anchored in authenticity and collaboration. This was no accident. Samantha was not simply participating in someone else's vision. She had become a catalyst for change and growth. And that realization, the certainty of her own self-worth, was the resounding victory. That was the true achievement. Now was the time to celebrate personal growth, shared dreams, and the prospects of a future where she was no longer just a passive observer, but a fearless contributor. She stood tall, embracing every uncharted territory ahead with unwavering confidence. Join her on this journey. You need to subscribe now to catch every moment of transformation that follows. Leave a like now to fuel this narrative forward and ensure we bring more stories that inspire action. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this triumphant conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible journey of overcoming. Your support is essential to keep these powerful narratives alive.